My name is Arpan Banerjee. I'm a doctoral fellow at Department of East Asian Studies and also an academic counselor at IGNU. And welcome to my learning session. I've been teaching you the paper BPAC 132, that is Administrative Thinkers. And so far in this paper, we have covered the following blocks. The first block that we had covered in the initial classes was regarding Indian thinkers, including Kautilya and Mahatma Gandhi ji. The second block that we have covered is that constituted of classical thinkers, including Woodrow Wilson, Frederick Winslow Taylor, Henry Fayol, Max Weber, and Mary Parker Follett. The third block that we've done is related to behavioral and systems thinkers, including Elton Mayo, Chester Bernard, and Herbert Simon. And we have very recently finished the fourth block, which included socio-psychological thinkers like Abraham Maslow, Rensis Likart, Frederick Herzberg, and Chris Argyris. And in the last class, we had started to discuss Dwight Waldo, who is the 15th thinker that we have been doing. He is a part of the management and public policy thinkers. So in today's class, we'll wind up Dwight Waldo, and we'll also discuss the thoughts of Peter Drucker and Ezekiel Dror. So let us begin with where we left in the last class, that is Dwight Waldo. So we had discussed about Dwight Waldo's biography, that he was an American philosopher, historian and theoretician also. And he did his master's in political science from University of Nebraska and his PhD from Yale University. And his PhD dissertation, The Administrative State, was his most famous work, from where we get most of his ideas related to public administration. And we had also discussed some of the prominent thoughts of this work of Dwight Waldo, that is Administrative State, in the last class. So according to this book, administration has a politics approach. And Dwight Waldo, he contradicted Woodrow Wilson by saying that politics and policy considerations, they cannot be excluded from administration. So Dwight Waldo rejected politics administration dichotomy. And he rather encouraged, he said that cooperation between political and administrative domains should be encouraged. And he also said that public administration, it differs from private administration because public administration takes place in a political environment. So public administration differs from private administration, according to Dwight Waldo, because of the political environment in which a public administrator has to operate. And some of the other things that we had discussed regarding Dwight Waldo's thoughts on public administration were that facts cannot be separated from values. In the last class, we had discussed all these. Administration is both an art as well as a science, according to Dwight Waldo. So he contradicted Woodrow Wilson, who said that no, administration is a science. And Frederick Winslow Taylor also said the same. So Dwight Waldo, we can see he has contradicted the classical thinkers. And some of the central ideas we had discussed in the last class, which we get from this book, The Administrative State. So the first one was that there is an intrinsic tension between democracy and bureaucracy that obliges career public servants to protect democratic principles. So this intrinsic tension between democracy and bureaucracy is what, according to Dwight Waldo, obliges career public servants to protect democratic principles. We had discussed this in the last class. And another very prominent thought that is related to Dwight Waldo is that politics administration dichotomy is false. So first, that there is an intrinsic tension between democracy and bureaucracy, which obliges career public servants to protect democratic principles. The second one is that politics administration dichotomy is false. So he contradicted Woodrow Wilson. The third one was that public servants must negotiate efficiencies demanded by the scientific management movement with due process and public access to government. And the fourth one being another significant thought of Dwight Waldo, in which he contradicted the likes of Frederick Winslow Taylor and Woodrow Wilson. That is, government cannot be run like a business. So government is not a private enterprise, it is not a business, hence government cannot be run like a business, according to Dwight Waldo. And we were also discussing Dwight Waldo's views on organizational theory. So he has discussed how organizational theory in public administration developed into three stages. The first one was the classical period, which is based on machine model of organization, and it ended with the publication of the papers on the science of administration. This was by Woodrow Wilson. The second phase of the organizational theory, which Dwight Waldo has discussed, is related to the neoclassical approach. So in this phase, it began with the Hawthorne studies in the 1920s, and it continued till the mid-century, which focused on emotions and socio-psychological aspects of human behavior. We have discussed the Hawthorne studies. And the third one was the modern organizational theory, which began with the publication of the book Organizations by March and Simon in 1958, which focused on organizational growth and survival. So now let us see some of Dwight Waldo's criticism of classical theory. So according to Dwight Waldo, classical theory was based on certain commonalities, and the specificity of the organizations were ignored. So they tried to generalize commonalities. So a lot of generalization was done in classical theory, and which ignored the specificity of the different organizations which it was studying. The classical approach also ignored the irrational and informal aspects of organization. It only focused on the formal aspects, ignoring the irrational and informal aspects of organization. So first criticism of Dwight Waldo was that the classical theory was based on commonalities, thereby ignoring the specificities of organizations. And the second one was that classical approach, it ignored the irrational and informal aspects of organizations, only emphasizing on the formal aspects. So that also was a weakness of classical theory according to Dwight Waldo. The third one is quite similar to the first one. According to Dwight Waldo, the principles of the classical theory, they are little more than extension of common sense. So he says that they're just an extension of common sense, nothing more than that. So they are based on certain generalizations or commonalities, ignoring the specificities of each individual organization. They ignore the irrational and informal aspects of organizations, only emphasizing too much, overemphasizing on the formal aspects, and also they are nothing more than common sense. So these are Dwight Waldo's views on the classical theory, his criticism of classical theory. The fourth one was that is a very significant thought associated with Dwight Waldo. So Dwight Waldo said, he contradicted classical theory by saying that values cannot be treated scientifically. So according to Dwight Waldo, values, they cannot be treated scientifically. You need to treat them normatively. So this was what Dwight Waldo believed. That is why he was a critique of scientific management of Frederick Winslow Taylor. And he also said that the efficiency of classical thinkers, it intended to replace moralistic approach to public administration. So classical thinkers, they only focused on efficiency, and the morals and the norms, they took a back seat. So according to Dwight Waldo, the efficiency of classical thinkers was intended to replace the moralistic approach to public administration. Now, some of his views, let us see some of Dwight Waldo's views on comparative public administration. So first, let us see the similarities. So comparative public administration, according to Dwight Waldo, it both resembles and differs from modern organization theory. So there are certain similarities and there are certain differences as well between comparative public administration and modern organization theory. Comparative public administration, it adopts a interdisciplinary approach, and it is always engaged in the search for universal concepts and theories based on comparison. And it relies on certain models like structural functionalism, and it provides an empirical description based on observations of the different administrative systems, and then tries to compare the administrative systems. For example, Fred Riggs is a very important proponent of comparative public administration. We're not going to do it in our syllabus, but Dwight Waldo, he has given these similarities between comparative public administration and organizational theory. And another similarity is that both comparative public administration and modern organizational theory, they have a concern for methodological problem. They are both based on empirical descriptions. They both have a concern for methodological problems. They both rely on models like structural functionalism. They are both engaged in the search for universal concepts and theories. And they both have an interdisciplinary approach, comparative public administration and modern organizational theory. Now let us see some of the differences between the two. So comparative perspective, it focuses on cultural diversities, which according to modern Dwight Waldo, modern organization theory does not. Modern organization theory does not focus on cultural diversity, whereas comparative public administration does. Now, let us see some of his thoughts regarding new public administration. So, Dwight Waldo was one of the foremost proponents of new public administration, and the first Minobrook conference in 1968, where the term new public administration emerged, it was held under Dwight Waldo's chairmanship, and it led to the advent of the new expression, that is new public administration. So we can say Dwight Waldo was one of the torch bearers, flag bearers of new public administration. And so Dwight Waldo, who was at that time a professor at the Syracuse University, he organized Minobrook conference, where the concept of new public administration came into being. And so the purpose of this conference, the Minobrook conference, which was held in 1968, of which Dwight Waldo was a foremost proponent. He was a torch bearer. He was one of the leading organizers of this event, which was held in 1968. So the purpose of it was to ascertain the domain of public administration from the perspectives of young students, teachers, and practitioners. So in order to take the perspective of the young students, teachers, and practitioners, this conference was organized. And in this conference, most of the delegates, they agreed that public administration, it lacked a consistent set of concepts. So public administration that had hitherto developed till 1968, that lacked a consistent set of concepts, and also there was a lack of an ideological philosophical framework and techniques that were needed to explain and practice contemporary public administration. So that is why this Minobrook conference was organized. And it was argued here by Dwight Waldo in this Minobrook conference in 1968 that instrumentalist role of public administration led to inefficiency or unresponsive and unimaginative methods. So, according to Dwight Waldo, it should not turn into instruments of repression but become humane. Public administration should become humane rather than turning into an instrument of repression. And by the end of this conference, new public administration emerged as a reaction or as an unofficial theme to describe the current trend of public administration. And the final proceedings of this meeting was the publication of this report that was called Towards a New Public Administration, the Minobrook Perspective. So this was published in 1971, Towards New Public Administration, the Minobrook Perspective by Frank Marini. So this was also a very seminal contribution of Dwight Waldo, the emergence of new public administration. And that is why Dwight Waldo will always be remembered for his seminal contribution to the field of public administration, especially as a key figure in the politics versus administration debate, and also as a leading organizer of the Minobrook Conference, where for the first time young and progressive scholars they participated, and they emphasized on transforming public administration into what we call new public administration. So, and Dwight Waldo, he also challenged the century-old principles and the pervasive notions that were existing at that point of time of value neutrality in public administration. And his writings, they asserted that administration could never be a dispassionate, scientific and mechanical job, which the likes of Frederick Winslow Taylor propounded. So Dwight Waldo said that no, administration, it could never be a dispassionate, scientific and mechanical job. Rather, administration was active and informed, as well as inclusive of democratic values. Because Dwight Waldo, he saw bureaucracy as a fundamental aspect of modern civilization and culture. So while at one hand he respected and defended administration, while on the other hand he was also aware of the shortfalls of administration and called for reforms to rectify its constraining and limiting tendencies. So now let us move on to our next thinker in this last block of ours, the 16th thinker, that is Peter Drucker. Without any delay, let us move on. So Peter Drucker has been called the father of modern management, and he has a background in psychology, sociology, law and journalism. He's written a number of books which we're going to see, and he focused on management by result. So the father of modern management, having a background in psychology, sociology, law and journalism, and his ideas were related to management by results. So some of his major contributions of Peter Drucker, let us see. So the first thought regarding to Peter Drucker is related to his views on the nature of management. So Peter Drucker was always against bureaucratic system, and he was in favor of creative and innovative organization. And he also said, he also gave his thoughts regarding the right perspective of managers. So according to Peter Drucker, management needs more practice than science. So Peter Drucker, while describing the nature of management, he gave his thoughts, according to which we can say that he was always against the bureaucratic system, and he was in favor of a creative and innovative organization. And he also emphasized that the managers, they needed to have a right perspective, because according to Peter Drucker, who is called the father of modern management, management needs more practice than science. So let us see some of the functions of management that Peter Drucker has propounded, that Peter Drucker has suggested in his works. So, according to Peter Drucker, management has no functions. Management, it has no functions because it is just an organ of an organization. It has no functions on its own. It is just an organ of an organization. And there are some of the things towards which management must contribute, according to Peter Drucker. The first one is the management must contribute to the mission of the organization. The management, which has no functions of its own, it is just an organ of an organization, it must contribute to the mission of the organization. It must contribute in making the work more productive. So the management, it must contribute to the mission of the organization, must contribute in making the work that is taking place in that organization more productive. So these are the thoughts of Peter Drucker. And also, the management must contribute towards fulfilling social responsibility. So nowadays, we see the concept of corporate social responsibility, CSR, that has been emerging. So Peter Drucker was one of the foremost proponents of that. So according to Peter Drucker, the management must contribute towards the mission of the organization, towards making work more productive, and towards fulfilling its social responsibility, because the management is just an organ of the organization. It has no functions of its own. So these are some of the things regarding management that Peter Drucker has propounded. So management, it must be motivating the workers. It must be engaging in decision making. It must have certain set objectives. And also it must take part in organizing. So decision making, setting objectives, decision making, organizing, and motivating. These are some of the functions of management that Peter Drucker has suggested: setting objectives, making decisions, organizing, and motivating. So Peter Drucker, while giving his thoughts on the structure of the organization, he said that organization structure should be based on performance and not on position. So the structure of an organization, according to Peter Drucker, it should be based on performance and not position. And there should be less number of organizational levels. So there should not be too much stratification within the organization. There should be less number of organizational levels, and the organizational structure should be based on performance and not position, according to Peter Drucker. And he also gave the different organization levels, the 3 levels of organization which he preferred. So he said that there should not be too many levels within an organization, and ideally, according to Peter Drucker, there should be 3 levels. The first level being the level of activity analysis. The first being the level of activity analysis. The second being the level of decision analysis. And finally, the level of relationship analysis. So there was this hierarchy that he gave. The first level of organization being the activity analysis, the second being the decision analysis, and finally the third level being the relationship analysis, the relationship between the management and the workers. So he preferred an organization based on performance and not on position, and that is why he said that there should not be too many organizational levels. It should be limited. And then he goes on to give the 3 levels of organization that should ideally be there. The first being the level of activity analysis, the second being that of decision analysis, and the third being that of relationship analysis. And he also described some of the functions of the management, Peter Drucker. The first one was setting objectives. The second one was decision making. The third being organizing, and finally motivating the workers. Because according to Peter Drucker, management has no functions of its own. Rather, it is an organ of an organization, and therefore it must contribute to the mission of the organization. It must contribute in making towards making work more productive, and also it must contribute towards fulfilling its social responsibility. So let us move on. Peter Drucker also emphasized on federalism. Federalism is like decentralization, sharing of power within an organization. In our constitution, also, the ideals of federalism are enshrined. The word federalism itself is not there, but Article 246, it divides the functions of the government into three lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. So similarly, so in order to ensure some sort of decentralization, the entire panchayati raj institutions and municipal governance, they are also for that. So similarly, Peter Drucker, he also emphasized on federalism within an organization. So he said that there should be centralized control in a decentralized structure. So some sort of quasi-federal. So you cannot say he was talking completely about federalism, but he was talking about quasi-federal structure. So the structure should be decentralized and the control should be centralized. So centralized control in decentralized structure. So this is what Peter Drucker wanted in an organization. So federalism, that is centralized control in a decentralized structure. Another very important thought related to Peter Drucker is his concept of management by objectives. So we've just seen how he emphasized on federalism within an organization, that is centralized control in a decentralized structure. The next idea related to Peter Drucker is related to his concept of management by objectives. So as you can see here, the first stage of this management by objectives is regarding jointly setting goals. So according to Peter Drucker, in an organization, the goals should be jointly set by the workers, by all the levels of management. So they should set the goals jointly and not in isolation. The goals should not be set in isolation, should not be set in silos. So the goals of an organization, they must be jointly set. And after the goals have been set, there should be a periodic review of the goals. So first stage of this management by objectives is jointly setting goals. The second stage being periodic reviewing. The third being allocating rewards based on progress. So the first stage was jointly setting goals. The second was periodic reviewing. The third stage of management by objectives by Peter Drucker is allocating rewards based on progress. And finally, the last stage of management by objectives is control if goals are not fulfilled. So at the initial stage of management by objectives, the goals should be set jointly. And in the second stage, there should be a periodic reviewing of the goals. And in the third stage, according to Peter Drucker, there should be an allocation of rewards based on progress. And finally, there should be some exercise of control on behalf of the management if the goals are not fulfilled. So this was a very important thought, a very important idea of Peter Drucker regarding management by objectives. So these were the prominent things regarding Peter Drucker. The final one that we discussed was management by objectives, which included jointly setting goals, periodic reviewing, allocating rewards based on progress, and exercising control if the goals are not fulfilled. We have also discussed how Peter Drucker he advocated for federalism in an organization, and he said that centralized control in a decentralized structure is required. So he was sort of quasi-federal rather than being absolutely federal. And he also said that the structure of an organization should be based on performance and not on position. Hence, there should be less number of organizational levels. And the three levels of organization he himself gave. The first being the activity analysis level, where the activities, which activities the organization is going to undertake, are analyzed. The second level of an organization is the level of decision analysis, where the decisions taken are analyzed. And finally, the relationship analysis, relationship between the management and the workers or the subordinates, are analyzed in this third stage. So the first stage being activity analysis, the second being decision analysis, and finally relationship analysis. Three stages of an organization. And certain functions of the management that Peter Drucker has given. The first being setting objectives, the second being decision making, the third being organizing, and finally motivating. So these are the four functions that Peter Drucker talks about of management. The first one is to set objectives, the second one is regarding decision making, third one regarding organizing, and finally motivating. Because according to Peter Drucker, management has no functions of its own and it is just an organ of an organization. It is, we can say, a cog in the machine. And that is why the management, it must contribute towards the mission of the organization. It must contribute towards making work more productive, and also it must fulfill its social responsibility. So we can say that Peter Drucker, he was against the bureaucratic system and he favored a creative and innovative organization. Because according to him, management needs more practice than science. So that is why we can say finally that Peter Drucker is rightly called the father of modern management. So now let us move on to our final thinker of this paper, that is Administrative Thinkers, BPAC 132. We have so far discussed 16 thinkers. Now let us move on to our final thinker, that is Ezekiel Dror. So Ezekiel Dror is our final thinker. So Ezekiel Dror was born in 1928 in Vienna, Austria. And he was a former professor of political science at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel. And in Israel, he also worked as a senior policy planning advisor in the Defense Ministry, Ezekiel Dror. And he organized workshops on policy planning for senior politicians and policy makers. Our final thinker, Ezekiel Dror. So let us now see some of the major works of Ezekiel Dror. The first one is Public Policy Making Re-Examined, which was published in 1968. The second prominent work of Ezekiel Dror is the Design for Policy Sciences. The first one being Public Policy Making Re-Examined. The second is Design for Policy Sciences. The third being Ventures in Policy Sciences. His fourth work, which was released in 1971 only, was Crazy States, a counter-conventional strategic issue. Uh, his next work is Policy Making Under Adversity, released in 1986. Afterwards, he published his work, that is The Capacity to Govern, a report to the Club of Rome. This was published in 2000. It had very important ideas regarding the Millennium Development Goals and sustainable development as well. The Capacity to Govern, which was a report to the Club of Rome related to ecological preservation, environmental conservation. So, Yesgel Rohr has also received the first annual Harold Lasswell Award for Policy Studies in 1983. Now, let us see some of his thoughts on public administration. So, the first idea of Yesgel Rohr, who is our final thinker in this paper, was regarding weaknesses in effective policy making. So, according to Yesgel Rohr, who analyzed the weaknesses in effective policy making in his work Public Policy Making Re-Examined, so according to him, some of the weaknesses were, so due to adaptation of micro approach, there is limited relevance to policy making system. According to Yesgel Rohr, due to adoption of micro approach, there is limited relevance to policy making system. And according to him, according to Yesgel Rohr, ignoring system analysis approach to knowledge is fragmented. So system analysis approach should not be ignored, and effective policy making, according to Yesgel Rohr, there was a negligence towards the critical elements of policy making because systems analysis approach was being ignored. That is why the knowledge that was being obtained, it was not cohesive. There was no coherence there. It was fragmented knowledge that was being obtained because there was an adoption of micro approach which did not have any relevance. So he was talking about those who had worked on public policy before him. So he was saying that they had adopted a micro approach which had very limited relevance to policy making system because they ignored the system analysis approach, and that is why the knowledge that they were obtaining was fragmented, which neglected the critical elements of policy making, which focused more on the traditional nature of research. So, in his book, you can see the design for policy sciences and ventures in policy sciences. We can see the emergence of policy sciences. So, he's a thinker regarding public policy, Yesgel Rohr. So, in his works, we can see these two works: Design for Policy Sciences in 1971 and Ventures in Policy Sciences, 1971. Also, Policy Making Under Adversity. So we can see the emergence of policy sciences. We can see in his works a clear understanding and improvement of macro control systems like policy analysis, alternatives, evaluation, feedback, and improvement of meta policy. So understanding and improvement of macro control systems like policy analysis, alternatives, evaluation, feedback, and improvement of meta policy. So rather than a micro approach, he adopted a macro approach. So instead of adopting, because he criticized the micro approach, because according to him, it led to the emergence of fragmented knowledge and it was not relevant to policy making system also. It neglected the critical elements of policy making. So that is why in his works, the works of Yesgel Rohr, we see that there is an enhanced understanding and improvement of macro control systems like policy analysis, alternatives, evaluation, feedback, and improvement of meta policy, which is policy about policy making. And he also said that policy science would break the barriers, the traditional barriers and boundaries. And policy science, according to Ezekiel Dror, it will do the work of bridging the gap between pure and applied research. So not only would policy science break the traditional barriers and boundaries, it would also do the work of bridging the gap between pure and applied research. It would also, so his thoughts, they also help us in understanding and improving of macro control systems like policy analysis, alternatives, evaluation, feedback, and also in improving meta policy, that is policy about policy making. And according to Ezekiel Rowe, policy science would break the traditional barriers and boundaries, and also it would contribute towards bridging the gap between pure and applied research. And Ezekiel Rowe, according to him, personal experience was also a very important source of knowledge. And he, in his works, he explored the value orientation in policy making. So not only did he try to bridge the gap between pure and applied research, and also break the barriers, the traditional barriers and boundaries through his ideas on policy sciences, he also said that personal experience was a very important source of knowledge in public policy making, and also he explored the value orientation in policy making. So he gave certain models of public policy making. The first one was pure rationality model, in which we see that there was a detailed criticism of existing public policy making. And the first model, that is the pure rationality model, that was given by Ezekiel Dror, its aim was to establish a complete set of operational goals, and it also worked towards making a complete inventory of values and resources. So not only did the pure rationality model give a detailed criticism of existing public policy making, it also worked towards establishing a complete set of operational goals, and also towards making a complete inventory of values and resources. So this first model of public policy making given by Ezekiel Rowe, it also worked towards preparing a complete set of alternative policies as well. So complete set of operational goals, complete inventory of values and resources, complete set of alternative policies as well, and also it tried to predict cost and benefit for each alternative, and also the expectation for each alternative as well, and finally choosing the best alternative out of these. So not only did it prepare a complete set of alternative policies, it also predicted it also did a cost and benefit prediction for each alternative, a cost benefit analysis it did. This pure rationality model of Ezekiel Dror, it established a complete set of operational goals, and it provided a complete inventory of values and resources, and also prepared a complete set of alternative policies. And after preparing a complete set of alternative policies, it did a cost benefit analysis for each alternative, and also what we can expect from each alternative, and finally it chose the best alternative. So this was his pure rationality model. The second one was the second model of public policy making. So we are discussing the models of public policy making by Ezekiel Rowe, who is our final thinker. And the first model we have discussed is the pure rationality model. Now let us move on to the second model of public policy making that has been propounded by Ezekiel Rowe. So the second model is the economically rational model. So in this model, it tries to keep the policies economical, cutting down on extravagant cost. So the the economically rational model, which is the second model of public policy making by Ezekiel Rohr. Its aim is to try to keep the policies economical. The third model that he has suggested is the sequential decision model. So we have discussed two models so far: pure rationality model, economically rational model, and the third model is the sequential decision model. So this model, it involves trying out two alternatives till one proves better than the other. So in a way, a trial and error method. So the sequential decision model, it tries out both two alternatives simultaneously until one alternative proves better than the other. The fourth one is the incremental model of public policy making. So in this incremental model, that we can observe a step-by-step decision making using past experience. So there is a step-by-step decision making using past experience. So we have discussed the pure rationality model of Ezekiel Rohr, which after giving a detailed criticism of existing public policy making, it goes on to establish a complete set of operational goals, and afterwards it makes a complete inventory of values and resources, and also prepares a complete set of alternative policies as well. And after it has prepared a complete set of alternative policies, it goes on to predict the cost benefit analysis for each alternative and the expectation from each alternative, finally choosing the best alternative. The second model is the economically rational model that we have discussed, which tries to keep the policies economical. The third one is the sequential decision model, which involves trying two alternatives simultaneously until one alternative proves better than the other. And the fourth one is the incremental model, which basically is step-by-step decision making using past experience. This was also advocated by Lindblom, a prominent administrative thinker. And the fifth model is the satisfying model. So this satisfying model is based on Herbert Simon's satisficing model, which basically involves choosing the first satisfactory alternative without going further. So this, you can say, is opposite to the sequential decision model, which tries both alternatives, two alternatives simultaneously until one alternative proves better than the other. The satisfying model of Ezekiel Rohr, which is based on Herbert Simon's satisficing model, it chooses the first satisfactory alternative without going further. And finally, we see the final model of public policy making that Ezekiel Rohr has propounded is the extra-rational model. The extra-rational model of public policy making by Ezekiel Rohr. This is the sixth model. It emphasizes on the need to use extra-rational abilities. So extra-rationality is a new concept that we get in our final thinker, Ezekiel Rohr. So these were the six models of public policy making associated with Ezekiel Rohr. The first one being the pure rationality model, which after providing a detailed criticism of the hitherto existing public policy models, went on to establish a complete set of operational goals. So Ezekiel Rohr, through this pure rationality model, he establishes a complete set of operational goals. Afterwards, he makes a complete inventory of the values and resources. After these two things are done, so basically we can say after these three things are done, a detailed criticism is provided of the existing public policy approaches, a complete set of operational goals are established, and a complete inventory of values and resources are made. After these three things are done, Ezekiel Rohr, he prepares a complete set of alternative policies. Afterwards, he does a cost-benefit analysis for each alternative. And what then in the next stage, he provides us with the expectations we can have from each alternative. Finally, the last stage of pure rationality model involves choosing the best alternative in order to create our public policy. The second model that we have discussed associated with the Eskel-Rohr is the economically rational model. The raison d'etre of this model is to keep the policies economical. The objective of this model is to keep the policies economical. Finally, we see the sequential decision model. So the sequential decision model is the third model of public policy making after pure rationality model and economically rational model. So the sequential decision model, it involves trying out two alternatives simultaneously until one alternative proves better than the other. The fourth model is the incremental model, where there is a step-by-step decision making using past experience. And the fifth model is the satisfying model based on Herbert Simon's satisficing model. So in this model, Ezekiel-Rohr, he advocates choosing the first satisfactory alternative without going any further. So it is, you can say, an opposite is completely opposite of the sequential decision model, which tries out two alternatives simultaneously until one proves better than the other. In the satisfying model, Ezekiel-Rohr advocates choosing the first satisfactory alternative without going further. And the final model is the extra rational model. So in this model, he emphasizes the need to use extra rational abilities. Not only limit yourself to your rationality, but extra rational abilities should also be used. We should look beyond rationality as well. The rationality should not be the limit. We should be looking beyond rationality while formulating public policy, according to Ezekiel-Rohr, who is our final thinker. So now let's conclude. He has also given finally certain barriers to policy sciences. The first barrier was the lack of belief in the abilities of science. So according to Ezekiel-Rohr, there was a lack of belief in the abilities of science. There was also one of the things that proved to be a barrier to policy sciences. So he worked in Israel, and he mostly worked under adversarial conditions because Israel at that point of time was engaged in many conflicts with its neighboring states. So there he observed that there was a lack of belief in the abilities of science that was proving to be a barrier, a hindrance to policy sciences. There was also a strong ritualistic attachment and beliefs amongst the policymakers. That was also proving to be a roadblock to policy sciences. And there were socio-cultural distances between scientists and policymakers. So, lack of belief in the abilities of science, strong ritualistic attachments and beliefs in the policymakers, and also socio-cultural distances between scientists and policymakers. These proved to be the barriers to policy sciences. So we have discussed the 6 models of policy making that Ezekiel-Rohr advocated. We have also discussed the barriers to policy sciences that Ezekiel-Rohr discussed, the lack of belief in the abilities of science, strong ritualistic attachment and beliefs, and socio-cultural distances between scientists and policymakers. And we also saw how he contributed towards the emergence of policy sciences across the world. Ezekiel-Rohr, his works, they enhanced the understanding and improvement of macro control systems like policy analysis, alternatives, evaluation, feedback, and improvement of meta policy, which is basically policy about policy making. And according to Ezekiel-Rohr, policy science would break the traditional barriers and boundaries. What are the barriers? We have discussed. And also, it is the work of policy sciences to bridge the gap between pure and applied research. And also, according to Yazgal Dror, personal experience is a very important source of knowledge. And that is why at Yazgal Dror, he explored value orientation in policy making. So, this was Yezical Dror, who also analyzed the weaknesses in effective policy making. First one being adoption of a micro approach, ignoring system analysis, which led to emergence of only fragmented knowledge, neglecting critical elements of policy making, and only listening people to the traditional nature of research. So these were the weaknesses. To overcome them, he gave his models of public policy making. So in this class, we have discussed three thinkers today. The first one being Dwight Waldo. We discussed Dwight Waldo's thoughts on public administration, how he said that politics and policy considerations, they cannot be excluded from administration, and politics and administration were closely intertwined, and there should be cooperation between political and administrative domains also, because public administration, it takes place in political environment, which separates it from private administration. And so that is why he contradicted the classical thinkers and those who said that politics and administration are different. And according to him, administration is more of an art than a science. So we have discussed all these things. He falsified the politics administration dichotomy, and he said that government cannot be run like a business, Dwight Waldo. We also did his views on organizational theory, the three periods: classical period, neoclassical approach, and modern organization theory. And also how he criticized classical theory, said that they were based on generalizations, they ignored the informal aspects, and they were nothing more than common sense, and values cannot be treated scientifically. We did all these. He also then went on to give his views on the similarities and differences between the comparative public administration and modern organization theory. Afterwards, his most important contribution was regarding the new public administration and the first Minobrook conference in 1968, which was held under his chairmanship, where young students, teachers, and practitioners of public administration were invited, which led to the emergence of new public administration and the publication of the Minobrook perspective, the report that is towards a new public administration, Minobrook perspective. And according to him, administration should not be an instrument of repression, rather it should become humane. So we did all these things in Dwight Waldo. Afterwards, we discussed Peter Drucker, who has been called the father of management. We discussed his thoughts on the nature of management, the functions of management we discussed, which was regarding the mission of the organization, making the work productive, fulfilling social responsibility. He also gave certain functions of the management, which we have discussed in this class, and also the levels of organization, activity analysis, decision analysis, and relationship analysis. We have discussed this in detail in today's class, and his thoughts on federalism in an organization and his management by objective. That was the final thing that we discussed in Peter Drucker. Afterwards, we discussed Yezical Dror's 6 models of public policy making in detail, and his contribution to public policy making, and also the barriers to public policy making that Yezical Dror identified. So this winds up our paper, that is BPSC 132. We have so far discussed 17 thinkers. These were the last 3 thinkers of our paper, and we have discussed all the thinkers, 17 of them we have discussed in this paper of ours. So the first 3 blocks we had discussed, and this was the final block, the block 5, that is management and public policy thinkers. This was our final block, and in this class, we discussed the three thinkers: Waldo, Drucker, and Bloch. So, thank you so much for joining this class, and we have pretty much winded up with this paper, that is BPSC 132 Administrative Thinkers. I hope you enjoyed and you understood what I taught in this paper. Thank you.